I'm gonna do my best to do that, but we'll see how it goes. It's the last one of the day. First and foremost, super grateful that you all, I literally, at the end of the last session, which was fantastic, I saw everyone leaving. I'm like, they're not gonna come back. So I'm so glad that you decided to return. And we'll just, I think it's interesting. They choreographed this event so beautifully, but there's a reason, I guess, why maybe I'm last. And one of the reasons is really about this topic, responsible AI at scale. And I'll tell you a little bit about my journey and why I'm here and why, hopefully, you'll find something useful in what I have to say today. But that is me. I am on the Twitter. But I'm also Noelle.ai on Instagram and TikTok. No dancing, I promise. Mostly AI stuff. And a lot of 7th graders think I'm very cool. About 1 million of them, actually. So that's kind of nice. But what I will do over the next, 30 minutes or so, is share with you what I've learned building some of the largest models, AI models in the world. And the only reason that they are what they are today is because developers chose to use them, consume them. We call it applied AI. And so I want to share with you, some good stories, as well as maybe some bad stories. I always like to start with my why and why I'm here. If you ever get a chance to tell someone your story, I hope you will do the same. I recently got married, so that's exciting. And this is my gaggle of humans that I get to raise and hopefully not break too much on their journey to becoming adults. But there's 2 main reasons I share with you these photos. One is my son, Max. Max was born 17 years ago. He has Down syndrome, and he was my firstborn child. And the geneticist, when she walked out, she looked at me and she goes, first-time mom, all nervous, wondering what's going on. And she said, you know what? There's 2 things you do with, children who have situations like this. That's literally how she talked to me. And she said, you can either put them up for adoption or you can put them in an institution. And I, being a first-time mom, was a little this is my firstborn child. I don't want to do that. But also, the lens upon which I look upon the world, maybe like some of you, is a technical one. I was like, certainly there's technology that can fix this. And if there's not, I want to be a part of that. So off we went into the world, and I became a special needs mom, but then I had 3 more children and realized they all need the technology that I wanted to work on. So you'll see here also, though, the second reason I got involved in the projects I'll tell you about is my dad. So I'm what they call the sandwich generation. I'm raising a bunch of kids and taking care of my parents. I don't know how many of you are like that, but many of us will be in this situation at some point. And he's awesome. I love him. He's a Marine if you know what that, is, it's like this hardcore sports guy. He was running 11 miles a day at the age of 68 years old. Super impressive. But one day he was running across the street and someone who was on their phone accidentally hit him with their car. And he suffered a traumatic brain injury, broke a bunch of bones in his body, woke up in an intensive care unit, looking up at the sky with this collar on, and he would never again use a computer in a traditional way, a smartphone in a traditional way. And I, that very year, had said yes to a project that no one really wanted to work on at the time. It was this little black box, and we were going around the world asking people to talk to it as if they were in a kitchen. This box was Jeff Bezos's favorite pet project at the time. Now, I don't know about you all. Now he has a different pet project, right? Like the rocket thing. But then it was Alexa, and he was super excited to be, building something for the kitchen. He told all of us, he wrote on a whiteboard, here are 17 of the projects I want you to work on for this kitchen device. He very specifically said, we're building this for those people who want to build a smart kitchen. That was our goal. And I was all in. I wasn't any special technologist. I was just a cloud developer at the time. I think I was running training on AWS before I took this journey. But the day that I did, that year, he had asked all of us to build skills or applications for Alexa. At that time, the only language I knew was Java, and every developer around me was like, we don't write in Java anymore. And I was like, But I mean, do you know every company is built on Java? I helped build them. But anyway, they told me we don't do that anymore. We use this thing called Node.js. And so I built over 100 applications for Alexa during that time. But the reason I did it was not to build a kitchen appliance for the 1% of the 1% who wanted a smarter refrigerator. I built it for my son, Max, and my dad, Irving. I built it for them. And because I became that voice of, shouldn't we think about doing this different? I realized how important that voice was in organizations. And now I'm intentional about building teams that have people that think like this, because we missed a huge opportunity on Alexa that we're now playing catch up on. But my second part of my journey was at Microsoft. So I built Amazon Alexa. I built over 100 skills. I have over 1 million, I think we just hit 2 million unique users of those skills as an independent developer. Like, I don't have a team. People don't write my code. I also have put all of my code, all of these skills on GitHub. You know, someone took my skill out of GitHub, did not edit it at all, published it on Alexa, and it's ranked higher than mine. That's how open source is sometimes. But I was happy for it. They got lots of, unique users that didn't get my skill. But that's the kind of developer I wanted to be. I wanted to build things before everyone else and make it available. So I ended up building a huge open source community around these skills. I am also an MVP for Microsoft, which may seem weird because some of us are like, either you're AWS or Microsoft or Google. I am completely, utterly hybrid cloud. I go to where the best of the best is. I like BigQuery on Google. I love Lex and recognition on AWS. And I love almost everything else on Microsoft. And I'm not contractually obligated to say that, though some may think so. But over the last few years, it's been a really interesting time. And the reason for that is we've built models from scratch and made them available to the world in ways that we've never done that before. Amazon Alexa has billions of utterances coming into it, meaning things that people say to the device every single day, which is pretty cool. Some of the models that I helped build at Microsoft were the beginning of what is today known as cognitive services. I was brought in when they were research projects and helped make them into big models. Now, the way that I did that, and that's why I called this topic Responsible AI at Scale, is that the decisions we made when they were little baby models turned out to be critical decisions that made them scale. The first month we were in production, we were getting about 100 inferences a month, 100 requests from developers a month. Right now, I think we're somewhere in the middle of 2.3 to 2.4 billion inferences per month. And you can't accidentally build infrastructure that can scale that way. Granted, of course, again, we're at Microsoft, we're at AWS building these technologies, so we've got a lot to work with. But here's something you may not know. Alexa was never part of AWS. It still is not to this day. It sits as part of the devices organization. And when we said, hey, AWS, we're building this thing, can you help us? Some of you may have had AWS say this to you. We have a well-architected program. You should go through it. You should become a solutions architect and learn how to build your own solution. This is AWS telling Alexa, build your own architecture. Good luck. We won't be liable if you totally break it. And we did break it for years until we started to get it right. So I do like to start some of my talks and at least squeeze it in at some point, this quote. And the reason I mention it, I was going to tell you before I get to it. These glasses, any of you seen them before? They're called the Wayfarers from Ray-Ban. They're the new devices that are coming out. Basically, what it allows me to do is click a little button. You'll see a little light. So it's not like creepy. I'm not doing like spy cam stuff. You'll know when I'm recording. But it allows me to record up to 16 seconds of video or take little snapshots, like that one. And then it'll instantly send it into my queue on Instagram, if that's interesting. Right? So I like them because I get to show people in my world what it's like to be on stage and what it's like to do these types of things. And my hope is that they don't see my videos and think it's terrifying. Ooh, sorry. Oh gosh, did I mess it up? But that they actually see these videos and kind of get inspired and go, I could do that. That looks kind of fun, especially on a big W. It's pretty cool. So I will share with you this quote, though. And the reason I share it with you is because Jeff Bezos had tweeted probably in, I don't know, 2015, 2016, somewhere in there, had tweeted that he was sharing this quote with his kids. He had taken a picture of it and put it on his refrigerator. I went to Microsoft and found in one of our all hands, our executives actually shared the same quote. Then I went to IBM, which I'm an executive at now, same quote. And I thought it was really cool. It gave me some hope. So let me share it with you, and then we'll talk about why it's so important. So what is success, right? Don't we always wonder? Some of us kind of battle with this, like what does it actually mean to be successful? What is success? To laugh often and much, to win the respect of intelligent people and the affection of children, to earn the appreciation of honest critics and endure the betrayal of false friends, to appreciate the beauty, to find the best in others, to leave the world a bit better, whether by a healthy child, a garden patch, or a redeemed social condition. To know even one life has breathed easier because you have lived, this is to have succeeded. Every time I read it, I like it. I like it because the biggest technology companies in the world, their leadership said that this was important, and that makes me happy. Sometimes, you get on Twitter or on social media and you see certain perspectives that are shared about our leadership in some of these companies, and you're like, do I really want to work for something like that? But when you realize that at the heart, they're teaching their children that just one life matters, that makes a difference to me. It makes me want to work for someone like that. And there's lots of reasons why I choose not to work for certain companies, but this does give me hope. One of the most interesting parts of this quote is that all of the people who have quoted it to me said that it came from Ralph Waldo Emerson. But in data, especially big data, it's very important to look a bit deeper. And I got off one stage one day and someone told me to look it up and go to page 2 of Google and see what it said. And I found out that Bessie Anderson Stanley actually wrote it. Interesting. Doesn't get credit to this day unless you look for it. But it was this woman who wrote this quote. And then Ralph Waldo Emerson made it successful. It doesn't really change the impact of the quote at all. But it is interesting to find out that sometimes when you look a little bit past the surface, you find that things are not exactly what they seemed. And so that's what I have found over and over again at the companies that I have worked at. Now, Amazon, Microsoft, IBM, National Public Radio, if you know that organization, I was able to become a leader in all of these organizations and build teams. And one thing I learned in those teams is that today I could get teams of developers to do very complex machine learning type of activities without actually having to send them to school to learn machine learning. That learning how to code was enough to be able to leverage some of the most powerful machine learning models on the planet. And when I did that, they were able to do things faster and better than most of their competition. We were able to sail by in market share when we were able to deliver features at lightning speed to our customers that our other, our counterparts or our frenemies in the industry were struggling to deliver. I always used to put a bet on the table at the beginning of the year of how many features we could release beyond what we thought. Right? Many of us know when we're on a development team, we kind of like go, okay, we're going to be able to do this in Q1 and this in Q2. I was like, all right, but here's what I'm going to do for us if we get all of them done, or if we take things that have been backlogged for ages and we're able to deliver on them. We have more power than ever through these technologies, but I always like to say, when we say we have power or lots of capability, a quote often comes to mind, right? When we have great power, right? Does anyone know this quote? With great power comes, okay, there's like 4 of you that were family. Thank you for saying. So great, good. With great power comes great responsibility. We now can use technology to do almost anything, and we need less and less coding skills to do it. And when you have that kind of power, we really need to be responsible with it. It's just like Uncle Ben said, or Voltaire, depending on your source. But it's extremely true. I will tell you, one of the things that I found is that when using applied AI, especially in, let's say, the world of Alexa, that I became very comfortable in, I never once thought about the impact the bad impact of Alexa. I always thought it was a great technology. It has made my son way more capable, my dad way more capable. My dad suffers from a traumatic brain injury, which removes his memories on a daily basis, right? So every night he goes to bed, he wakes up, short-term memory is wiped clean. Anyone seen like 50 First Dates or Finding Dory, right? That's it. Super frustrating for a caregiver to answer the same question over and over and over again. But Alexa made that possible. Not only possible, but made it pleasant. Alexa never got frustrated with him. Same with my son. Never showed frustration, never showed irritation. Though some of you might think when you talk to Alexa, it responds irritated, but it's not true. So applied AI helps us do a bunch of things. And by the end of this talk, I'm going to share with you what the world's leaders are asking us to build and what we can build today with the AI APIs that are already available. I find them to be some of the best kept secrets in the world. We do, though, as we kind of begin to build this new generation of technology, we do have to build it in a different way. One of the saddest stories I had was I walked off stage and was approached by really a huge collection of women. These women were either named Alexa or had children, and these were the ones I was most concerned about, had children named Alexa that were born in the year, a few years before 2013, a little range, which put them in first grade, the year Alexa had its biggest sales ever. Here's what ended up happening. Those little kids would go to school and their friends would tease them and command these little girls around at school like robots. And I almost laughed the first time I heard it. I'm like, seriously? But those girls would go home and cry and wouldn't want to go back to school. Oh, it's terrible. I never thought I would build that. I never thought I would be part of that. Another woman, came up to me after I got off stage one day and was like, do you realize you're teaching our kids to command a female voice around without much empathy or thought? And it's really hard for a first or second grader to translate that into a difference between talking to a robot and talking to a human. And I, being the messenger, was like, no, I didn't know. Was not my intention. So what I do now is I always try to encourage inclusive engineering teams to think bigger. In other words, think about all of the perspectives in the room. And the richer those perspectives are, the better. I always ask us to build a symphony in the room. I'm not asking us to have, more women or more people of color, right? Ethnicity and gender, of course, yes, have more of them. But what I want to do is look around and see a symphony of ideas, divergent thinkers, neurodiversity. And when you have different colored skin, guess what? It is neurodiverse. When you have someone who is an underrepresented minority, it becomes a diverse perspective on your team. So what I always encourage teams to do is look around and make sure almost everyone is disagreeing with you. I always used to say, in my teams, if you would walk by our conference rooms, it almost looked like we were fighting all the time. Because we were constantly like, well, I'm not sure about that. What about this? We were always having divergent thoughts. The one principle we had, especially at Amazon, was called disagree and commit. That you would say your piece passionately, vehemently, and then you'd come to a decision and agree with it as if it was your own idea, even if it wasn't. That takes a bunch of stuff. Courage, humility, but it's how you build great software. It's why Amazon is one of the best at what it does, because it allows you to voice your concern. It does say do not hold pocket vetoes as part of their, right? Don't wait to say I told you so. I will tell you, though, most people do tell me that they told me so when I choose a wrong path. But I think that's okay. It's kind of part of the fun. We don't always get it right, but we should create environments that allow people to be psychologically safe enough to build. The second thing before we get to the API specifically is around multimodal building. So how many of you in here have built an application that includes voice technology? Oh, come on. Not one. Okay, but there's one, so it happens. I will tell you, though, how many of you in here have heard of Alexa? Maybe it's too late for that. Okay, phew. That'd be a disaster. But a long time ago, 2014, I was on stages all the time talking about Alexa, And the range was very similar. When I'd ask who knows Alexa, right, one person or no one would raise their hand because nobody knew it yet. And that's the future of voice technology inside applications. Voice technology, and I believe this for all of the APIs that I'll tell you about, but voice specifically removes friction in applications in a way no other can, right? In a way no other user interface can. So I always say, no matter what you're building, no matter what it is, how you're building it, at least somewhere in your roadmap say, wouldn't it be cool if someone could just talk to our software, could just execute a natural language invocation to do the thing that our software does? Why wouldn't we do that? Do you know how many people who cannot use a device could then access the thing that you're doing? I represent a bunch of engineers that have cerebral palsy. They are in wheelchairs. I am very passionate about this group. They are some of the smartest engineers I've ever met. But the software and even the development environment they work in is not conducive to them. They can't type. So they have all of these things that they're adding to their world to make it possible for them to write software. When I was like, gosh, couldn't we just build things in a multimodal fashion that allows your brain to do the work? I don't know how many of you have heard of OpenAI. Well, I'm sure you have. But if not, you should look it up. But they created a codex that translates machine language into human language and back again. And it allows us to make products like voice-enabled coding a possibility. GitHub has launched a portion of this by implementing OpenAI inside of GitHub in a product called Autopilot, I think, or Copilot. Anyone know? I think it's Auto. Yeah, okay. Yeah. So, and I'm a beta member, which is kind of a disgrace that I don't remember exactly the name, but I was in the beta and I loved it. I hated it at first, like most people with AI. They're like, I'm not so sure about that. Do I really want 20 years of coding history to be the way we train new developers on how to code? But what I found out was a lot of new developers, they won't even try. They will get into a situation where they're learning code and they get stuck, like we all do, and then they quit. They have very little patience. And so what the automated code builder does is it allows us to get people to build more. And when you build more and you find success, guess what? You build even more. And I found that to be hugely valuable in our space. So when you're building something, build multimodal. And I don't just mean build for voice. I do mean build for every modality. So that means start thinking about the metaverse. I know, you have to say it at least once in a talk these days. But you should build for the metaverse, right? You should build for these environments that allow us to be truly accessible to everyone. I do believe in the ethical and responsible use of AI. I've mentioned to you why. But here's the cool part about ethical and responsible AI. It's not a technical thing. It's a human thing. It means that you actually have to ask critical thinking questions that some of us who are raised in liberal arts colleges, we need to ask those questions. Psychology, human behavior, right? What will this thing that I'm building, how will it help people? But also, how will it hurt someone? And this is where inclusive engineering comes in, because only someone with a child with that name will be like, oh yeah, that's probably not a good idea. Or we should at least consult with that community. Someone who, is passionate about elder care, has a dad that they're worried about, will raise their hand and say, could we just change it a little bit and include this group of people? It's so interesting that you could build extremely valuable solutions that serve more people by simply asking a different question at the very beginning. So I also, of course, believe in learning by doing. It's why I always publish all of my code that I build on GitHub. I want someone to, that's how I learned. I told you I built over 100 skills in the first year of Amazon Alexa. I actually owned 10% of all apps on Alexa in its first year. It only lasted like 15 minutes. But there was a party that our house went wild. I got a t-shirt, and if you're a dev, you know that that's like gold. So I got a t-shirt for it. But it was important at that time because I didn't know Node.js, I didn't know Python. I learned both of them and just kept building. I use a concept similar in art, tracing paper, if you're an artist, right? Where you can do very complex things in art if you take a really complex piece of art and trace over it. You build muscle memory. GitHub became my muscle memory builder. I built hundreds and hundreds of existing applications on GitHub and then got enough information to put those pieces together myself. But those pieces come in a bunch of different formats. So this is a study that I did, and in this study, I was able to talk to, I invited, me and my team, a group of 500 CEOs of the top, these are Fortune 500, Fortune 1000, I guess, but 348 CEOs responded. These were the boxes that they said, we want to build AI solutions for, and we are investing money to do it, right? So customer intelligence, that makes sense. This is like the recommendations engines you see on Amazon and Netflix. Customer-facing chatbots. Well, if you know, chatbots kind of had a bad season. Now we're trying to rebrand them into intelligent agents. But actual intelligent agents that solve customer problems, we've actually found that they've solved or increased productivity of systems like hundreds of %, right? We've been able to increase the amount of customers that can get served by hundreds of %. Obviously, this is all dependent on how big your customer base is, but these are for some of the largest companies in the world. Others that I really like is retail intelligence. I would love it if I go to a site and I'm looking for, I don't know, a watch or a purse, and I say, I'm looking for a purse. I come to this site, and it says, do you have a picture of a purse that looks similar? And I go to my fashion magazine. I don't read fashion magazines, but if I did, I'd go to a fashion magazine, right, rip it out or take a picture of it, upload that picture into my little intelligent agent, and it would go find me a purse that matches that. Not just from its inventory, but from anyone's inventory. Wouldn't that be nice? So there's lots of different ways. Of course, more specific ways if you happen to be, I'm talking about consumer stuff so far, but if you're on B2B, lots of ways for us to leverage AI. And the reason I mention this is because there is applied AI, meaning APIs that you can use today that can impact all of these use cases. So you don't have to be a data scientist, though I love them. I would say I am one, but I've only built one model end to end. I've impacted or worked on or debugged hundreds of models, but I've only built one from start to finish. So I kind of call myself a data engineer now, because I'm more like a software engineer who really likes data, who really likes data science, and most importantly, who likes applied AI. I heart AI. Did you know? Okay. So these are the three different areas that I think as a developer or a user experience or product person, you should be thinking about implementing in your technology. Conversational AI, of course, I've already kind of beat the drum of, hey, get out there and build voice applications. Add voice to whatever you've got, and it'll be cooler. Knowledge mining, which is the ability for us to actually go into organizations and pull insights. It's the promise of artificial intelligence. How does an application you're building bring value to the company? And one of the ways is by looking at data and providing insights. So I'll talk to you about how to do that. And finally, it's a little-known secret, process automation. We call it RPA in some, BPA, or business process automation in other circles. But if you can use artificial intelligence to, let's say, augment the human decision, wow, that sounds like something we want to do. Why? Because not everyone, I'll tell you a very specific story. There was a company in California, Silicon Valley. They were building chips, like chips, Intel chips, but they weren't Intel. They were building chips, and their engineers spent 30% or more of their day reviewing chip schematics, looking for errors with their eyes. Like looking and going, yeah, that looks good, no, that doesn't. And they'd literally categorize them manually. This was only maybe 5 years ago. They were not super efficient in doing this, so Microsoft, and I was part of this team, decided, hey, why don't we just go in and say, we could build you a tiny little model that will review those schematics and just bubble up the anomalies. We call it anomaly detection, which really is just, computer, read all this. Anytime you see something that doesn't match the baseline, tell us about it. That increased the productivity of those scientists hundreds of fold. I think it was something like 780%. But most importantly, productivity increased and employee satisfaction increased. That was the surprising metric. Retention increased. People didn't hate going to work, which is awesome, right? I find the same with when I build AI solutions for HR or legal, because I get to augment what they're already doing, but get them to focus on the thing they like. the problem solving they like to do. And that's the power that we have here. So these are, I apologize for those in the back. I always have to show a slide that you're like, what does that say? But I think you'll have these slides accessible. I also share every slide I have on, I think it's called slideshare.net. Does that date me? But it's maybe now called something else, but LinkedIn bought it. And so you can get all of these anyway. But these are all of the little pieces, what I call the puzzle pieces that you can add in to any existing technology, any existing application, any existing component that you're building, and leverage AI to do the job better. So obviously, I focus a lot on the speech and language piece because I am a big believer in accessibility, and accessibility means making the call to your software be able to happen from a bunch of different ways, whether it's voice technology, whether it's just being able to type in natural language. We're seeing lots and lots of human parity in this space. Some of my other favorites, though, are computer vision. I did a computer vision model a couple years ago. I built it from scratch, and it was to identify, when you go to Disney World, there's these characters, Chip and Dale. Now, wait, you know who I'm talking about, right? Like the chipmunks. Anyway, so they actually have a movie out right now. But Chip and Dale, and you can't really easily tell the difference between them. I don't know if any of you know the difference between them. But what I did is I created a computer vision model, and I said, here's the nice thing about applied AI. I didn't need thousands or hundreds of thousands of images to train it to do what I wanted. I needed 21 images. 21 images, and I could now tell a model, hey, let me know if this is Chip or Dale when we take a picture at Disney World or Disneyland or whatever Disney you're at, right? And so all I did was upload these 21 images. I then put a bounding box around the thing that I thought that was the most different. Turns out their noses are different colors. Maybe that's easy for you to tell, but my kids were little at the time, very little. So I gave them this tool. But it became more of a fun exercise because like a month later, I was asked to go and talk to one of the largest produce growers in Latin America. And guess what they wanted to do? They wanted to figure out how to tell if produce would go bad before it got to its destination so that they could increase the sustainability of their entire pipeline. And I was like, I built a model like that. We could actually build a model that could compare produce, right? And all of this as a developer. Like, I'm not a data scientist. I'm not going in and building a model from scratch. I'm building them an application that can be used to look at their produce line and tell pictures. Like, a computer can tell if something's going to go bad way earlier than my human eyes can. And so it could actually, over time, detect the day at which it would become unsellable. And they would know that before they even shipped it. Knowing now, guess what that allows them to do? It allows them to go local for produce that will expire more quickly and go longer for produce that won't, making most of their produce much more usable. So not only does that impact sustainability, which I'm a big believer and fan of, but it also impacts, of course, their bottom line. Because at the end of the day, responsible AI and sustainable application development, it's not government regulated, it's not required, so I have to tie it to the business outcome. I have to make sure that it's also tied to, and you make more money. That's how I've been able to do it so far. So there's tons of stuff on here. Translation is another one. I always tell organizations, if you have a natural language interface, why not let your customer speak in the most natural language possible, their native language? Microsoft now supports over 90 languages in text, 30 or so in voice. So why wouldn't I enable that? It's literally 2 calls. One call to a language detection service that'll tell you what language your customer is talking, and then another call to do the real-time translation. And it is fast. It's running on Azure, so it's fast, right? And of course, that speed depends on your solution architecture. But why wouldn't we do that? Why wouldn't we leverage some or as many of these services as we can to bring the value of what we're doing in our software closer to the people who need it most? So, of course, conversational AI, this is where I tell you that I like Alexa, love it, but I went to NASA, right? I think maybe they used to be the space people. But anyway, I went to NASA, and they said, hey, we want to build a Mars rover, and we want to take it to schools and have little kids talk to it. And I was on Alexa at the time, and Alexa was like, okay, yeah, that sounds awesome, but you're going to have to name the rover Alexa. And the rover the Rover team was like, but it's called Rovi. We're not going to call it Alexa. And Alexa literally was like, well, then you can't use it. Lex was not available. Other NLUs were not available as an API at that time. Needless to say, they switched. They ended up going with something at Microsoft. But it's really important to think about, like, how do you want to make your system more accessible? In this case, Rovi decided to build a bot. In this case, an intelligent agent. But the architecture here is extremely important, because as we start building multimodal solutions, the brain of those multimodalities should sit in one place. At National Public Radio, I had a team that built on Google, a team that built on Alexa, and a team that was about to build on Samsung Bixby for devices. And each one of them had a different code base. And at one point, they were going in divergent directions. What? It seemed like a waste to me. I was like, why don't we should have all the functionality in one place, and then these vehicles of getting the information to our customers should just be channels. And that's what this architecture represents, that if you are going to build multimodal, you will probably have to think about how to build solutions in a way that do not silo your development teams. So today, I've kind of shared with you a bunch of different things, but my hope is that you have, number one, some insight into how some of the biggest companies in the world have been challenged by building responsible AI. But these types of decisions are how we are going to scale these solutions, right? You're going to have to think when you build something today, especially today, that even if you build it, I always say we're one acquisition away from the Death Star, right? Like, we never know who's going to acquire your system, who's going to have access to the data that you've collected. So it's really important that you do it responsibly, even if you don't think anyone's watching, or if you think you'll own that data or system or solution for life. So I encourage you to ask better questions, right? To get get a team together that cares about this. I almost always, when I go into big companies, these are like the Fortune 100 companies, as an IBM executive, there's always one, maybe two people in that room that care about responsible AI, care about ethics, care about fairness and bias. Find these people, get together, encourage each other to raise your hand when you see something's broken. I'll end with this, maybe I shouldn't, but I'll end with this. I was only ever fired once. And that firing came from me saying something about a model that I thought was not good for the world. I literally was like, this is a bad one, we should not do this. I did not go through my chain of command. I went right to the CEO. It was that important to me. This was before, it now is almost cool to get fired, by the way, for ethical AI. There's a bunch of us out there. But at the time, I thought my career would be over. It turns out there's companies looking for people who raise their hand, looking for people who want to be responsible, because at the end of the day, there are about 36 government regulations that are going to force you to be responsible. And companies that have thought about it already, it's just like GDPR, if you remember, the more prepared you are for that on this side, the less detrimental impact it'll have on you, your business, the work you're doing, when it actually becomes a requirement. So I encourage you to ask better questions, raise your hand if you say something, see something, and find friends to work with you that have a different opinion than you do about almost everything. Thanks so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed it, and I will see you at the party.